Welcome to Opportunity Zones 2.0 Explained, your ultimate crash course on what Opportunity Zones are, why they're now permanent, and how developers and investors can participate in Opportunity Zone investing. Plus, I'll unpack all of the new OZ 2.0 rules that were introduced when President Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law on July 4th, 2025, including new OZ 2.0 tax benefits for investors, new rural incentives, the looming 2026 dead zone, what the new OZ 2.0 map may look like in 2027, and new reporting requirements. I'm Jimmy Atkinson, founder of OpportunityZones.com and host of the Opportunity Zones podcast. I've been covering Opportunity Zone investing since 2018. Let's dive in. So first, I think it'll be helpful to explain Opportunity Zone's origins and why I believe it's the greatest tax incentive ever created. In 2017, President Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act into law, and it created the Opportunity Zones program. It was a bipartisan community development incentive. It's the largest economic development program in United States history. Over 8,700 census tracts were designated in 2018, and it channeled billions upon billions of dollars into underserved areas all over our country. And there's three core benefits for investors. One, deferral of any capital gain until December 31, 2026, as long as the gain is rolled over into a qualified opportunity fund within 180 days of its triggering. Two, basis step-up benefits were available for early investors. If you were able to hold on to your Opportunity Zone investment for 5 or 7 years prior to the end of 2026, you received either a 10% basis step-up or a 15% basis step-up that effectively reduced your tax bill that came due in 2027. And finally, and this is the biggest one, permanent exclusion of capital gains tax on your Opportunity Zone investment as long as you hold it for at least 10 years. That's right, this is the biggest benefit of all. That's why I believe it's the greatest tax incentive ever created. If you hold your Opportunity Zone investment for 10 years or more, you pay zero taxes on the appreciation of that investment. The results to date are undeniable. Likely there's been over $160 billion in equity invested in Opportunity Zones so far. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created. Over 300,000 new housing units have been created in Opportunity Zones because of this program. And the best news is, because this program was set to expire at the end of 2026, Congress just leveled up the program. Opportunity Zones 2.0 has now made the program permanent with the signing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law on the 4th of July. The demand is strong here. It's a bipartisan supported economic development initiative, and it's now going to be around for many, many years to come. And so now I did want to spend just a minute or two going through the timeline, both of the original Opportunity Zones 1.0 program that is still in effect through year-end 2026, and what the new program will look like in terms of its timeline. So on the screen right now is an Opportunity Zone timeline. You can see that Opportunity Zones were created by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, toward the end of 2017 when that program was signed into law. Over 8,700 Opportunity Zones were then designated in July of 2018. We had final regulations on Opportunity Zone investing issued by the IRS toward the end of 2019. And of course, also around that time, that's when the 15% basis step-up expired on December 31, 2019. That was the last date that anybody could possibly invest in Opportunity Zones and achieve a 7-year hold prior to the deferral date of December 31, 2026. A similar 10% basis step-up benefit expired at the end of 2021. Then we had this long period of time where really nothing happened. There was a lot of investment happening in Opportunity Zones from 2022 through 2025. And as we sit here today, I'm recording this in July of 2025, just a couple weeks after the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed into law. And that act effectively creates OZ 2.0 and makes Opportunity Zones a permanent part of the tax code. The OZ 1.0 deferral date still remains December 31, 2026. Any existing investors in qualified opportunity funds and any investors who invest in qualified opportunity funds throughout the rest of 2025 or anytime in 2026 are subject to that deferral date of December 31, 2026. That is effectively when their gains that they rolled over into Opportunity Zone funds will come due as of that tax year, payable in April of 2027. Now, the Opportunity Zones 2.0 timeline looks a little bit different. This came into effect when President Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act into law on July 4th, 2025. There's that green starting flag there. What's going to happen is there will be a new period of new OZ 2.0 designations. New census tracts will be designated as opportunity zones beginning in July of 2026. That process is expected to last up until very close to the end of the year. December of 2026 is when it should be officially wrapped up. The new OZ 2.0 map and benefits will take effect on January 1, 2027. And then the current Opportunity Zone 1.0 designations will expire on December 31, 2028. So you'll notice that we actually do have a 2-year period of time from January 1, 2027 through December 31, 2028, where both the OZ 2.0 and the OZ 1.0 map will be in effect at the same time, effectively an overlap of OZ 1.0 and OZ 2.0 designated areas. So here it is. Here's a look at HR1, the One Big Beautiful Bill. And if we go down to page 152, we'll find the Opportunity Zones language. So page 152, we can scroll down here. Subchapter C, Permanent Investments in Community Development. And the first section that deals with that is Section 70421 of HR1, deals with the permanent renewal and enhancement of opportunity zones. This is why we're here today talking about this. And so this section of this mega bill does 3 big things. A, decennial designations, and there's a lot of language about the decennial designations and the decennial designation process, which makes opportunity zones permanent and with new designations every 10 years. B, qualifications for designations have changed. So essentially, they tightened up the eligibility criteria for census tracts that could be designated as qualified opportunity zones. And then C, application of special rules for capital gains. They tweaked quite a few things with respect to Section 1400Z-2, which deals with how capital gains that are deferred into opportunity zone funds are treated. Fourth thing, Part D here, is information reporting on qualified opportunity funds and qualified rural opportunity funds. And effectively, the rest of this bill under this section that deals with opportunity zones deals with new reporting requirements for qualified opportunity funds. Now, we'll touch on this very briefly a little bit later in this video, but I'm going to plan on releasing a much more detailed video on the new reporting requirements at a later date. Now, to discuss what's new in Opportunity Zones 2.0, I thought it'd be helpful to take a look at the redlined Section 1400Z document that I created. Section 1400Z is the part of the tax code that defines both opportunity zone designations and the special rule that applies to capital gains that are invested in opportunity zones. So we'll start with Section 1400Z, which applies to the designations. You'll see that I've deleted out the areas that have been stricken from the statute, and I've put in blue text the new areas, or the new text, I should say, that have been added to. So first of all, the special rule for Puerto Rico is eliminated. Puerto Rico is now going to be treated just like any other state. They'll only be able to nominate 25% of their low-income census tracts as opportunity zones. Of note, by the way, this goes into effect as of December 31, 2026. More on that in a moment here. Low-income communities has been redefined. I'm going to talk about this at greater length a little bit later in today's episode, but effectively there's now a tighter definition around what a low-income community is. Tighter eligibility criteria need to be adhered to for any census tract that wants to become an opportunity zone. I'll discuss that more in a few minutes. This is the part, this blue part here, decennial determination date, that effectively makes opportunity zones permanent. There is now going to be a period every 10 years where new zones get determined. We'll see if we scroll down here. The applicable start date for these new zones will apply January 1 of the year following the designation period. So when this first comes into effect will be in July of 2026, will be when the determination period opens up. Like I mentioned a moment ago, I expect that process to take most of the second half of 2026. I think we will get the final certified list from Treasury in December of 2026, and then they take effect the January 1 of the following year, so January 1 of 2027. But of note here, according to this red line doc, this is going to happen every 10 years. So every year that ends in 6 will be a new designation year, and then every year that ends in 7, January 1 of that year that ends in 7 will be when new zones go into effect. So the first such period of time in which this will happen will be in 2026, taking effect 2027, but it'll happen again in 2036, taking effect January 1 of 2037, and so on and so forth. Now let's take a look at section 1400Z-1, the effective dates. These are the new ones here. The effective dates of these amendments: Puerto Rico, the special rule on Puerto Rico gets repealed effectively December 31, 2026, which means, unlike all of the other OZ 1.0 zones, which still sunset on December 31 of 2028, any zones that were designated in Puerto Rico because of the hurricane relief that went into effect at some point in 2018, those zones will be sunsetted a little bit early. Those zones are going to be sunsetted on December 31, 2026. Puerto Rico did submit a list to the Treasury Department of the 25% of their low-income tracts that they wanted designated in the first place early on in 2018. And then later in 2018, Congress said, you know what, to help with hurricane rebuilding efforts, we're going to just make sure that every low-income census tract in Puerto Rico is designated as an opportunity zone. So that 75% will be repealed on December 31, 2026. A little caveat there for investors in Puerto Rico to bear in mind. And then this Second Amendment here, or note on the amendment, basically states that the qualification for designations will kick in immediately. So like I mentioned before, the designating period begins July 1 of 2026. It's going to take a period of some months, and then they go into effect January 1 of 2027. Now let's discuss Section 1400Z-2, which deals with the special rules for capital gains invested in opportunity zones. You'll see that references to December 31, 2026 have been stricken, and this effectively creates the rolling 5-year deferral period, which is one of the biggest benefits and new features of OZ 2.0. Instead of there being a deferral date written into the statute, which was December 31, 2026 for OZ 1.0, beginning for any investments into qualified opportunity funds on January 1, 2027 or beyond, all of those investors will receive a 5-year deferral period. Okay? Let's keep scrolling here. The determination of basis has also been completely rewritten. Much simpler. We've gotten rid of the 5-year holding rule that gets you to 10% basis step up, and the 7-year holding rule that gets you to a 15% basis step up. And instead, now everybody will simply get a 10% basis step up for investments held for 5 years. So basically at your deferral date, which is 5 years for everybody, you'll get a 10% basis step up. Okay. Now for the only exception is for any investments in qualified rural opportunity funds. Any opportunity funds that focus on rural investments, that basis step up will actually be equal to 30%. Okay. So that's a really key impact there for rural. And I'll talk more about rural a little bit later in the program here. Special rule for investments held for at least 10 years. Been a minor modification to this part of Section 1400Z-2. Overall, by the way, the 10-year benefit remains basically the same. If you hold your qualified opportunity fund investment for 10 years or more, you get to exit that investment completely tax-free. You do not pay any new capital gains on the appreciation of your opportunity zone investment. The only thing that is clarified here is that has to happen within 30 years of your investment start date. And if it doesn't happen within 30 years, then you just mark it up to fair market value, and at anything beyond that point would be taxed on. So a 30-year period. What's currently, or what had previously been in effect, is a drop dead date of December 31, 2047. You had to take your step up to fair market value or sell your investment prior to the end of 2047 in order to achieve that 10-year holding period. But now they've just made it a 30-year rolling period for everybody. Let's see. Applicable start date has been changed from December 31, 27 to just the applicable start date in a couple of spots here. We'll keep scrolling here. Substantial improvement. So one other rural benefit is that substantial improvement applied when the qualified opportunity fund exceeded an amount equal to the adjusted basis of such property. That was the 100% substantial improvement rule. It is now only 50% for rural property only. So this only applies to rural areas, but it's another incentive for rural. Okay. Scroll through a little bit more here. Almost done. I'm going to scroll all the way down now to the effective dates. So this is really interesting, actually. This is a common question I get is, well, when do these new rules take effect? In almost all cases, all of these new OZ 2.0 rules apply only to investments in qualified opportunity funds made after December 31, 2026. So this does not apply to existing investments. It does not apply to any investments in 2025. It does not apply to any investments in 2026. It only applies to new opportunity zone investments made after December 31, 2026. So starting January 1, 2027. There is one rule right here. The 50% improvement rule for rural areas is effective on the date of the enactment. So as of July 4th, 2025, if you have any rural structures that you're looking to improve, you now only need to meet a 50% substantial improvement rule. That's effective immediately. That's like the one kind of interesting effective date of section 1400Z-2. Otherwise, everything else just goes into effect basically on January 1 of 2027. And now just to recap, I want to recap basically where we are with respect to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, of course, was that mega bill that was passed by Congress. It was kind of going back and forth in Congress, starting as early as I think it was February of 2025 was when they started this budget reconciliation bill process with a lot of different procedural votes and rules that were created. And then finally, everything started getting very serious in about May of 2025 was when the House released their initial draft. And then it went back and forth. But eventually, the final version of the bill was passed by the Senate by a final tally of 51-50. Vice President J.D. Vance had to break a tie. On July 1, 2025, the House passed it a couple days later by a final tally of 218-214. This did pass along partisan lines, although I would note that the opportunity zone policy in this bill is supported in broad bipartisan fashion by members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, by Republican governors, by Democratic governors, by Republican mayors, by Democratic mayors. It doesn't have 100% support of everybody. There are some detractors, but it enjoys pretty broad bipartisan and bicameral support. And then finally, the One Big Beautiful Bill was signed into law by President Trump on the 4th of July, 2025. Now, some key OZ 2.0 provisions, just to recap what we highlighted in that redlined Section 1400Z document. First of all, I think, and most importantly, opportunity zones are now a permanent feature of the tax code. There's no longer a sunset date written into the statute. So there's a 5-year deferral period now for all new investors. Gains invested on or after January 1 of 2027 can be deferred for 5 taxable years. Once you hit that 5-year mark, you'll get a 10% basis step up on your deferred gain, and it effectively reduces that tax liability on your deferred gain amount. It's very simple now compared to the older program under OZ 1.0. And importantly, it's available for every OZ investor starting January 1, 2027. No matter which year you invest in, this benefit doesn't expire. It doesn't sunset like it did in OZ 1.0. OZ 1.0, we had those 5-year hold benefits and those 7-year hold benefits that really went to reward early adopters of the program. This new, very simple 5-year deferral, 10% basis step up at the 5-year mark applies to everybody in every year, no matter when you invest. So very simple there. Additional rural incentives will also apply. So just to recap, the 10% basis step up for qualified opportunity fund investments made after December 31, 2026 will become 30% basis step up for investors in qualified rural opportunity funds. It's a new type of opportunity zone fund that has been effectuated by this One Big Beautiful Bill Act, a QROF or a CROF. I've heard it referred to a few times, Qualified Rural Opportunity Fund. So investors in those funds will get a 30% basis step up at the 5-year mark. And the substantial improvement of existing rural structures is now just 50% instead of 100%. So a question I've been getting on a lot of the different webinars and classes I've been teaching the past couple of weeks is, well, what the heck is a rural tract? How do I get a rural opportunity fund? What does it mean, rural? So it's a rural area is defined in the One Big Beautiful Bill, this section of the code, as any tract that is in any area other than a city or town that has a population of greater than 50,000 inhabitants, or any urbanized area contiguous and adjacent to a city or town with a population of greater than 50,000 inhabitants. Now, it's not 100% clear which census tracts are going to meet that definition, which don't. There isn't really an existing map of census tracts that adheres to this definition. As far as I can tell, this is a brand new definition of rural. So I think the Treasury Department will have a little bit of work to do to create a map that satisfies all this. We talked about opportunity zones now being a permanent feature of the tax code. We talked about the 5-year deferral and the 10% basis step-ups available for new investments after December 31, 2026. We talked about the additional incentives for rural opportunity zone investments. I want to spend some time talking about this new decennial zone designation schedule and the tighter eligibility requirements, and effectively what is going to result in a new map of opportunity zones, and how tighter eligibility requirements will have a major impact on the number of opportunity zones that get designated every 10 years. And first of all, we should take a minute just looking at the current map, because this current map still applies for anybody investing in 2025 or in 2026. This map is not going anywhere, and in fact, these zones in this map remain eligible through the end of 2028. There are 8,764 census tracts. I should note one more time, though, that the census tracts, a lot of the census tracts in Puerto Rico are going to expire at the end of 2026. But I'll just zoom in here on Fort Worth and Dallas, and we'll kind of take a look, because this is where I am. A lot of zones in Fort Worth in the northern part and just south of the city right here. Just 1, 2, 3 or so zones in the mid-cities of Arlington and Irving, those areas there, and then quite a few in and around Dallas as well. You'll note that there are opportunity zones in every state, in just about every major city. They are rural, they are urban, they are suburban. Like I mentioned, there's over 8,700 of them. Puerto Rico, I'll zoom in on them right now. Basically, nearly the entire island of Puerto Rico is designated in an opportunity zone. There's a few in and around San Juan and the airport area up here that are not designated as opportunity zones. But if it was deemed a low-income census tract, it got to be an opportunity zone in Puerto Rico. Unlike the rest of the United States, don't forget about Alaska and Hawaii up here. The rest of the United States, each state was allowed to designate only up to 25% of their low-income census tracts as opportunity zones. So just to restate again, these opportunity zones, the blue shaded regions on this map here, and by the way, you can find this map at opportunityzones.com/map. These opportunity zones are still around, and if you invest in a qualified opportunity fund in 2025 or in 2026, they're going to use this map. The new map does not open up until January 1 of 2027, and of course, there's that kind of funky 2-year overlap between OZ1 and OZ2, where both maps will be in play. So let's take a look at what the new map might look like. And thanks to our friends at the Economic Innovation Group, this is a map of every census tract in the country that would be eligible according to the most recently available data. And the data that they are using here is the 2019 through 2023 American Community Survey 5-year estimates. Now, very important, a couple of notes here. One, this is not the OZ 2.0 map. That map does not exist, and it will not exist until probably second half of 2026. I'm guessing December of 2026 is when we'll see the final certified list from Treasury with which maps can then be created. This is a map of every census tract in the country that would be eligible to be deemed an opportunity zone with currently available data. So the second big caveat is the Treasury Department is not likely to use this data. They're likely to use more up-to-date data that will be available in 2026. My guess is they'll start creating their list of eligible tracts in the first half of 2026, likely using 2020 through 2024 American Community Survey 5-year estimates, which is that data set is not currently available. And then finally of note is, each state here has quite a few yellow shaded regions. Just note that only 25% of these low income tract regions will be designated as opportunity zones. So I think this map is directionally correct. We can kind of take a look at, I've zoomed in here on Texas right now. I can zoom in on Dallas-Fort Worth here. But Dallas-Fort Worth, this is not what the final map of opportunity zones on January 1, 2027 will look like. It'll probably look like roughly 25% of these tracts in Fort Worth, maybe roughly 25% of these yellow shaded tracts in Dallas will be designated as opportunity zones. We could look at a few other places, by the way, too. I'd like to look at downtown San Jose because I have a client of mine, Urban Catalyst, who does a lot of investing there. And they may or may not be rolling out an OZ Fund 2 in 2027. And they were very worried that a lot of downtown San Jose may or may not be designated as opportunity zone eligible going into that program when they were first starting to study this a couple years back. But it looks like, there are a few tracts in San Jose. These tracts here between Highway 87 and downtown are no longer opportunity zones. I think this area here was opportunity zone land in the western part of downtown San Jose a couple years back. No longer is, but a lot of these tracts a little bit east, and especially encompassing San Jose University, are still OZ tract eligible. In order to be OZ tract eligible, I'll kind of explain the change in the rule here also. You can see I clicked on this census tract here and it shows two really key metrics: poverty rate of 37.12%. If the poverty rate is 20% or greater, then the tract qualifies as an opportunity zone as long as the median family income ratio does not exceed 125. So in this case, this tract qualifies because of a very high poverty rate, higher than 20%, and the median family income ratio does not exceed 125. The other way for a tract to qualify is if the median family income ratio is 70 or lower. So let's click on this one right here, and that's how this one qualifies. The poverty rate's not that great. It's actually lower than 20%, but the median family income ratio is lower than, it's 70 or lower. The median family income ratio is basically, it takes the median family income and it divides it by the area median family income, or in some cases, the statewide median family income. So that's how zones are designated. Now, previously, by the way, this median family income ratio threshold was not 70, but 80. So it allowed for many more census tracts to be eligible to be designated as qualified opportunity zones. So we'll see this one here in the western part of downtown San Jose. It has a median family income ratio of over 91, so it doesn't qualify there. And the poverty rate is well below 20%, so it doesn't qualify there either. So that's why this one is no longer eligible to be a qualified opportunity zone. Let's see, one more area I want to zoom in on is Richmond, Virginia. I have another client there, Capital Square, who does a lot of development in the Scotts Addition neighborhood of Richmond. So if I can just zoom in on Richmond here, you know what, I can also use this search tool that EIG has available. I can just actually type in Scotts Addition Richmond, Virginia. It pops up right there. So zooming in there, and well, unfortunately for Capital Square, it looks like a lot of the areas where they're developing in Scotts Addition will no longer qualify, although it's pretty close, right? The poverty rate here does exceed 20%, and the median family income ratio exceeds 125. So that's why that little carve out, if it exceeds 125, you can't use it. But it's pretty close, right? So, over the course of the next year, all of these numbers nationwide are going to change. So there is a possibility that the numbers change a little bit and that this Scott's Addition area does get pulled in as an eligible census tract to qualify as an opportunity zone. This one doesn't seem to be anywhere close. The poverty rate's only 7%, and then the median family income ratio is well above 70, so it wouldn't qualify at all. Click on a couple of these other ones here. That one's not very close. This one's not very close. Let's see. This one's not very close. And now we're getting into the much wealthier part of town here, so these aren't going to be close to qualifying. If I go just north here, northwest, I guess, that one's not particularly close either. But you get the idea. But some of these little bit east of Scott's Addition, north of downtown, would still qualify. This one's not particularly close to being disqualified. It's got a very high poverty rate and a very low median family income ratio. It currently qualifies under both rule sets. This one, same thing, very high poverty rate, pretty low median family income ratio, 65.35. Remember, the threshold is 70 right there. So that's a little bit about the map of potential areas all around the country. And I focused in on Dallas, Fort Worth, San Jose, and Richmond. Those are potential areas, potential census tracts that could be deemed eligible next year. Now, again, next year, the Treasury Department will use an updated data set. So this EIG map will change. And then one other tool that I'd like to highlight, and I'm going to make this available for download, is that I ran a similar study, but I actually did not put it into a map, but I have this very large Google Sheets document, which I'll also make available as a Excel file. I have a yes or no for every single census tract in the country. How many are there? Let's see. There are 85,000 plus census tracts all around the country, including Puerto Rico. The other overseas territories, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, and U.S. Virgin Islands, are on separate worksheets in this file. But for each census tract, column Q here identifies whether or not it is OZ eligible. So here we go. Census tract 210 in Ottawa County, Alabama, would be eligible. Has a high percentage area MFI, that median family income ratio, 93.95, so it wouldn't qualify there. But the poverty rate is 22.46%, so that's how it qualifies. And this is below 125, so it would continue to qualify there. And I've done this for every single census tract all over the country. And then here's a state-by-state comparison of how each state does relative to what the 2018 map would look like. And this is a pretty big deal. I've estimated now that I had originally estimated based off of draft legislation that the House introduced in May that we'd see a roughly 22% fewer opportunity zones come into effect. I've now performed analysis on the final version, which disqualifies that special rule for Puerto Rico, and made a few other adjustments based on a couple of minor other tweaks to the low-income community definition that went into the final version of the bill that was signed into law. And as a result, we're going to get a reduction of 25.5% of opportunity zones in 2027. Current number of opportunity zones, according to the map that was introduced in 2018, we have 8,764 census tracts nationwide that have been certified as opportunity zones. The new map, the OZ 2.0 map, which takes effect January 1 of 2027, I'm estimating about 6,500 census tracts. Now, one big caveat here, by the way, and again, this, just like it applied to the EIG map, I am using a data set of the 2019 through 2023 American Community Survey 5-year estimates. That is likely not going to be the data set that the Treasury Department uses. They're not doing this process for another year. So they're going to have one more year of data. They're going to have an updated data set. Again, they're likely to use the 2020 through 2024 ACS 5-year estimates. So these numbers will likely change. I'll perform another analysis when that data set becomes available at some point next year, in the first half of next year. But until then, I'm anticipating a drop of a little greater than 25% of opportunity zones 6,530 is the number that I'm estimating based off of 25,000 and change eligible tracts all over the country. State by state, what does this look like? Alabama's going to get a 10% drop in opportunity zones. California will see 30% fewer opportunity zones. Some other big drops: Colorado, 29% reduction in opportunity zones. Illinois will receive a 24% reduction in opportunity zones. Iowa, 32% reduction. Kansas, 30% reduction. Let's see, Minnesota, huge reduction, 43% fewer opportunity zones in OZ 2.0. Nebraska will see a 39% drop. Puerto Rico is a big one, right? Because that special rule got eliminated, they'll see an 80% drop in the number of opportunity zones on the island. Oregon, pretty substantial drop, 36% drop. Wisconsin will see a 36% drop as well. Let's see, we got at least one jurisdiction that received a little bit of a bump. Let's see, Louisiana, actually, a little bit of a bump upward, a 3% increase in the number of opportunity zones. They moved from 150 to 154, according to my estimates. New Mexico, a little bit of a bump. They got one additional opportunity zone. They're moving from 63 to 64. Let's see, we got one or two more here. Virgin Islands moving from 14 to 18. Everybody else either holds steady or, in most cases, a drop, if not a significant drop, in the number of zones. Texas only receives a 3% drop. That's where I'm located. 628 zones, moving down just to 607. A lot of this, by the way, reflects the population changes across the different censuses. The 2010 census and the 2010 census map is what determined the first designation period in 2018, and now we're using a 2020 census map. So that map changed significantly across that decennial census that takes place every 10 years. And then fifth and finally, expanded reporting requirements. Qualified opportunity funds will have more reporting requirements every year when they file IRS Form 8996 with the fund's tax return. Back to the mega bill now. This last section here dealing with opportunity zones refers to new reporting requirements for qualified opportunity funds. So new reporting requirements, they're not too burdensome. And I'm going to cover this in much more detail on a later episode of this show. But essentially, Form 8996 will now require reporting on the number of employees, the number of housing units, and the NAICS codes of the businesses that a qualified opportunity fund invests in, or a qualified rural opportunity fund invests in, starting in 2027 and later. There's also additional penalties introduced in this part of the mega bill for non-compliance. And again, I'm going to touch on these new OZ 2.0 reporting requirements in a separate episode at a later date. So now I want to talk about a few problems with the bill and a few things that didn't make its way into the bill. By the way, I should stress again that this bill for opportunity zones is very welcome news. The fact that opportunity zones are now permanent, the fact that we have this new rolling 5-year deferral schedule for any investments made beyond January 1, 2027, these new rural incentives, the new map, really looking forward to it. This is all great news for the opportunity zones industry, for opportunity zone investors, for opportunity zone communities, and for opportunity zone developers. But there were a few items that the industry had requested that did not make its way into the mega bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And I did just want to review those really quick. And then I also wanted to highlight a couple of new issues that were created by the mega bill. So first of all, there's no extension for current opportunity zone investors. Any OZ 1.0 investors, anyone who's deferred a gain into a qualified opportunity fund so far, or will do so for the rest of this year, 2025, or in 2026, any investment made in a qualified opportunity fund through December 31, 2026 gets that deferral date of December 31, 2026. There's no extension of that deferral date. There's no change there. There was a lot of discussion about possibly extending that deferral deadline or that deferral date at numerous points in time over the last several years. And eventually when push came to shove and this bill started to go through Congress, that just lost a lot of support. And instead, attention turned to making the program permanent. And that's what ultimately got done. But for existing investors, there's no benefit of an extension. Tax treatment of non-gains dollars, there is none of that still. So this is still just a program that applies to eligible gains. There was some discussion about maybe making it available for ordinary income or for after-tax dollars. I just call it non-gains dollars, but that did not ultimately end up being included in OZ 2.0. Feeder funds, or qualified opportunity funds that could invest into other qualified opportunity funds, also is still prohibited. And no new language that would create anything called a feeder fund that would effectively accomplish something similar to that. So there's still no fund of funds available for opportunity zone investors. Interim gain relief, the ability to reinvest interim gains, which I think would have been huge for certain types of investments, especially VC style funds, investments in operating businesses, or even certain types of real estate operators who like quicker turnover periods, buying and holding for maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then turning it over into a new property. They're still out of luck, those types of strategies. There's no relief for an interim gain reinvestment, unfortunately, included in this mega bill. Likewise, there's no relief for pre-existing operating businesses to qualify more easily. Pre-existing operating businesses that have tangible property find it very difficult to qualify for opportunity zone investing. And then one other idea that was being advocated for, additional incentives for creating affordable housing. There's no additional incentives for that was ultimately included in the OZ 2.0 bill. Okay, a couple of new OZ issues created by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We discussed the second one on this list here, that 25% reduction in the number of opportunity zones. That's a big one. The map's going to be a lot smaller, starting effectively on January 1, 2029 is when the OZ 1.0 designations will go away, and we're stuck with just the OZ 2.0 designations. That map's going to shrink by quite a bit. But I also want to discuss the 2026 dead zone issue. So what do we mean by this? Well, effectively, it means that there's a disincentive for many investors to invest gains or defer eligible gains into a qualified opportunity fund before January 1, 2027. This is going to be particularly true in the second half of 2026. In fact, some might argue the entirety of 2026. If you have a capital gain event that comes through on a K1 in 2026, you do not have to invest that gain at all that year. So why wouldn't you wait until January 1, 2027 or sometime in early 2027 to defer those K1 eligible gains into a qualified opportunity fund? Now, for non-K1 gains, if you have an eligible gain accrue to you individually, and it happens in the second half of 2026 such that your 180-day clock ends in 2027, why wouldn't you then just wait until 2027? You see what I mean? If you have a gain, say, in mid to late July or later of 2026, there's not really any incentive to quickly roll that gain into an OZ 1.0 fund, or at least that's the general consensus. And by and large, I believe that that's true. I do think that there's going to be a bit of a dead zone issue for fundraising in 2026. But that said, I do think that there are still a few reasons why a reasonable investor might want to make an investment in 2026 in this dead zone period of time. Reason number one, the earlier you make your investment, the earlier you start your 10-year clock. Now, if the deferral is of great value to you, and I know it is to many investors, there's really not a great case to be made for making an investment in the second half of 2026 into a qualified opportunity fund, because you effectively get no deferral period. There's no deferral. You defer until December 31, 2026. So your deferral is still in tax year 2026. It's effectively zero, right? So if you wait until 2027, however, now you get a 5-year deferral period and you get a 10% basis step up at the deferral date. But what if you're interested in just starting your 10-year clock sooner? And there could be a pretty big difference between starting your 10-year clock in, say, January or February of 2026 versus the first half of 2027. It's one additional year of time that you're buying yourself. Now, if you're already toward the end of 2026, that's not really that great of a benefit, I would say. So the later we get in 2026, the less and less likely it is that somebody's going to be really antsy to start their 10-year clock instead of just, I'll just wait a few weeks and I'll invest in 2027. I'll get these new benefits. And the the 10-year clock starts a few weeks later, but I can deal with that. But there's a 1-year difference, maybe it does make a difference. Reason number 2, there's more certainty of where opportunity zones are located. Remember, we don't get the OZ 2.0 map until the second half of 2026. Probably, I'm anticipating it's going to be closer to December of 2026. In fact, if you do the math on the different 90-day periods and the 30-day periods, and then the 2 different 30-day extensions that the Secretary of the Treasury can extend to those 2 periods of time, you get taken out to December 27th of 2026 is the last possible date that the Treasury Department could release their certified list, the official list of opportunity zones, if they adhere to the schedule as statutorily defined, and if they apply all of the extensions. So I'm anticipating sometime December 2026 is when we're going to get that final certified list of qualified opportunity zones from the Treasury Department. Those zones will go into effect January 1 of 2027. But what do we do before then, right? If you're thinking about making an opportunity zone 2.0 investment before then, you don't really know what the map is going to look like. You're not sure where your capital might end up getting deployed. If you just want certainty, we know what the OZ 1.0 tracts look like. They're locked into place. They're available now. They don't expire until December 31 of 2028, with exception of some of those census tracts in Puerto Rico. The vast majority of tracts, all the other tracts, are in effect until December 31 of 2028. So particularly if you have a gain in the early part of 2026, it's a K1 gain, let's say, so you have the option of either waiting till 2027 or deferring closer to when you actually trigger that gain in the first half of 2026, you might want to defer that gain sooner to, 1, get your clock started, but also 2, you know where the map is. You know what the map looks like, you know where the zones are, and you know with certainty, okay, that zone that I want to invest in is definitely available today. I know it expires on December 31, 2028. I could wait until January of 2027 to defer this gain, but then I've lost a bunch of time to deploy that capital into that zone, and there's no guarantee it's going to be a zone in 2.0. So that might be one reason why you might want to make a deferral earlier, I should say. Reason number 3, I think this is a pretty big one. You know what the tax rates are going to be in 2026. There's not going to be a change to the tax rates in 2026. We know what they are, okay? But do we know what the tax rate's going to be in 2032? I don't think you know, or your accountant knows either. We don't know who the president's going to be. We don't know what control of Congress is going to look like. Well, wait a second. Why 2032? Well, 2032 is 5 years beyond 2027. So that will be the tax rate that applies to that first cohort of OZ 2.0 investors. So if you defer a gain into a qualified opportunity fund or a qualified rural opportunity fund in 2027, you get a 5-year deferral period that kicks into effect the date of your investment. That takes you out to sometime in 2032 is when you actually recognize your gain, whether it was triggered in 2026 or 2027. Your deferral clock starts the date that you make the investment, plus 5 years, you're in 2032 now. That's the tax rate that's going to apply to that deferred gain. What's the rate going to be then? I don't know. It might be the same as it is today. I don't think it's going to be lower. And there is a chance that it could be much higher, though. And by the way, if it is much higher, that makes Opportunity Zone tax incentive, that big benefit, that 10-year step up to fair market value, it makes that benefit much, much more valuable. But it kind of hurts you on that deferral date, right? So we know what the tax rate is going to be for eligible gains in 2026. It's typically 23.8%, right? So we know what that rate is going to look like today. If you want certainty over that, that might be another reason. That's the third reason why you might want to make an investment in 2026 rather than waiting till 2027. So ultimately, it depends on, do you value starting your clock as soon as possible? Do you value knowing where the zones are? Do you value knowing what the tax rates are going to be? Do you not want the risk of a future rate being much higher than it is today? By the way, one thing you could consider is you could do a little bit of both, right? If you have a gain that's triggered in 2026, you don't have to roll over that entire gain immediately or delay the rolling over of that entire gain. You can do a little bit of both. Maybe you take a little bit of the gain, maybe you say half of the gain you defer immediately in 2026, and then the other half you can defer in 2027. So you're kind of dipping into both strategies a little bit there. Just some food for thought. I'm not your investment advisor, but just something to think about. Well, I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching this Opportunity Zones 2.0 crash course. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button. And if you want more videos like this, consider joining my OZ Insiders Mastermind community, where I host a live Opportunity Zones masterclass every single month. You can learn more about how to join that community at ozinsiders.com. Now, I shared a number of OZ 2.0 resources in this video, including my redlined Section 1400Z document, an OZ 2.0 eligibility map from EIG, and my list of OZ 2.0 eligible census tracts using existing data. If you'd like links to any of these resources from this video, I'm making all of this available for you. You can find those links by going to opportunityzones.com/crash course. That's opportunityzones.com/crash course. Finally, please be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening app to always get the latest episodes. I'm Jimmy Atkinson. Thanks so much. See you next time.